Every teenager has a story, and some of those stories are partially written behind bars. In this episode of Student Ministry Connection, we're talking about how to step into difficult places to minister to teenagers who are incarcerated, how to get involved in your local juvenile detention center, and how to come alongside teens who desperately need the hope of Jesus. Let's get ready to connect and grow. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection. My name is Steve Cullen, and I'm so glad you're here for this episode. While I have worked with a lot of students from various contexts, the one thing I've not done yet is step into a juvenile detention center. I do get to work with some amazing leaders who do this all the time, though, so I know I'll be there at some point, and probably in the very near future. And one of those leaders is my friend Orlando Hale, who has served in various ministry roles, including as a chaplain for incarcerated teens. Today, you'll hear his story of how God broke his heart for this population of teens, how you can get involved in serving with juvenile justice ministry, and how you can serve the students in this context within your community. We've got lots of great things to talk about on this episode, so let's not waste any time and jump right in. Hey, Orlando, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. It's really good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, we've had an opportunity to work together for the last couple of years with NNYM and got to serve for the partnership we have with GLS Next Gen. So it was cool to hang out with you for a few days there in Chicago. But I've gotten to know your story a little bit over the years, but I want our podcast audience to hear your story, what God has been doing in your life to bring you to the point where you are today.
Yeah. Well, for me, I was always raised in the church. And reality, I give thanks to my mother because she really took the scripture seriously when it just said, train up a child in the way that they should go. And when they're old, they won't depart. And so I have to give all credit to that. I can't say that I have a, super cool come to Jesus moment, if you will. But I will say that my faith was the most tested when I was in college, where I did have just a real season of doubt. But it was really surrounding, what I was purposed to do, who I'm purposed to be. I went to school for aerospace engineering because I wanted to be a rocket scientist, right?
Hmm.
Always been a nerd, loved it, enjoyed the classes, but just did not enjoy college. Didn't enjoy the traditional classroom setting. And I started to look back at my life and recognize as much as I had done in school, I never really like excelled academically from the standpoint of the traditional space. I got honors in a class that was religion, right? So that's where I excelled academically, was in my religion course. And so from that space in college, I ended up going into ministry, accepting my call at a Baptist church in Tuskegee, Alabama. Greenville Missionary Baptist Church will always be near and dear to my heart. And in that space, I was given a broom and some chairs to put up. And so for about 3 years, just learning to have a heart of service, but then looking back at my life and recognizing that that's where I've always excelled. When I was in high school, learning to be a leader, a guy named Mike Gordon poured into me, a believer who loved me enough to have hard conversations with me and expect leadership out of me, where I was the manager for the football team when everyone else wanted to play. And I loved being the first guy out there and the last guy to go home,
Mm,
right? I loved getting the things that other people needed to be successful.
mm,
I felt a calling there. And so as I fast forward back to college, just letting all that come back together and just say, I think I'm been designed for a life of service. And
yeah.
not, we're all created to serve, right? But like from the standpoint of I just genuinely find joy and love, showing up for people. And so that's kind of where it all started for me. I think I found myself in a big bout of depression because I was trying to perform in a different way.
Mm,
I was trying to show up different from what I was created for, and just had to accept that. And so I fell in love with ministry because, not because I was preaching, not because I was teaching. I didn't preach or teach for about 3 years, and had the opportunity to just serve and show up. Absolutely fell in love with that. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. So I think that's kind of where my journey led me, just recognizing that God always put me in a space to serve.
mm.
And that's what ministry started for me. And I fell in love with it even deeper.
That's so cool. Yeah. I love how it started with several years of service, and I wonder if more of our ministry journeys should start off something like that rather than throwing someone on the platform and just expecting or putting the spotlight on them. But maybe we should start off more with serving behind the scenes, and then if God pushes us that direction, that'd be great. It seems like it's really worked out well for you.
Yeah, I can say that. It's funny because I just had a conversation with my cousin, and the question came up of like, "Well, how long did it take for you to get ordained?" I was like, "Well, my journey was different, and it took me 10 years from when I first started in ministry to being ordained in ministry, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, right?
Mm,
I wouldn't trade the moments of starting one place in one context, moving to a whole nother city and state, and then having to start literally all over again in another context where at first I felt like I was being done a disservice because all the work I had put in previously and a licensure that I put in previously was no longer being counted. And definitely been the biggest growth space for me was having to start over
mm,
after doing all the things, and that really made me start asking questions about myself, not the systems that are at play or the difference between a missionary Baptist church or a non-denominational church or Presbyterian, or like it just everyone's system is different and all the different things. And so it was like, okay, God, what do you want from me in ministry?
mm,
Right? How am I going to be led by you in this
mm.
and not just answer to, people's expectations? And I think it was the best thing for me in ministry.
So I know, Orlando, you have a lot of hats that you wear in ministry now. One of them is with an NYM, but at your church, you're doing a lot of different things. We are just talking, offline about something else you might be getting involved in the future.
Mhm.
So, but I know that one of the things that I've always loved about you is your heart for juvenile justice ministry. The students that are kind of in the system or just kind of stuck behind some hard situations, and your heart goes out to them. So where'd that passion for juvenile justice ministry start?
Yeah, it started by happenstance. I needed a job in college and I found a third shift job at this facility in Tuskegee, Alabama. It paid pretty decent, and so I was just like, "I'm gonna go do this. It's third shift, I can stay in school, it doesn't interrupt anything I got going on." And so it turned out to be a juvenile detention center. It was a drug treatment facility, actually, and it housed 2 different kinds of youth. One side was adjudicated youth for DYS, Department of Youth Services for Alabama, which is just incarceration for young people, and then the other side was like job and family services, young people who were under the custody of the state, but they weren't adjudicated, but needed drug treatment as well. And so, working in that space, working with adjudicated youth, working with youth from really tough situations and environments, system involved youth is really the main passion I started to develop. And it's because I started to hear their stories,
Mm,
right? Develop
mm,
relationship with them, even though at the time I was barely 22, the kids started calling me pops, started using me as a father figure. And
mm,
I I say that word on purpose, right? Using me because I was okay with being used, right? In a good way. And just learning that I could show up for them at work was just really cool. But even more than that, developing relationships with them, hearing their stories, I learned a lot about trauma
mm,
firsthand from talking with them, right? And recognizing it like, hey, like these young people have definitely made some mistakes, but I think the biggest mistake was just who they were born to. And that wasn't their fault, right? It
yeah.
was like hearing stories of young men who had their father in their life, but their father was not a good
Mm,
representation of what it meant to be a father or be a person, right? And so that's just where my passion began, was just talking with those young people, seeing that they've been through more than most of us could ever imagine going through in an entire lifetime. They did it in half the time, a third of the time, right?
wow.
By the time they're 14, 15, 16 years old, they've lived much fuller lives than most of us ever should have to live.
Mm,
And so my passion grew from that. And then I saw a hunger in those young people because they found out I was in ministry, right? I'm a minister at my church, one of the only youth pastor in the entire county in Macon County, Alabama. And they immediately gravitated towards me for that,
mm,
right? They started asking for prayer. I didn't even offer, right?
wow.
It wasn't a part of my job. I wasn't allowed to do that, right? I wasn't the chaplain. And became the unofficial chaplain where the staff leadership had to kind of call a meeting like, hey, we need to formalize this before we get in trouble, you know? We got to find a way to make this official because you really can't do this. And so kind of telling them like, well, I'm not asking. They're asking me, right? They're asking to pray before bedtime. They're asking to pray before meals. They're asking to talk about God. And they had really, really good questions that made me rethink my doctrine,
Mm,
right? Made me rethink what my relationship with Christ looked like because they started asking me real questions.
mm.
Wow. So yeah, that kind of where it all started for me was just falling in love with a bunch of young men who were just hungry for God and didn't let their traumatic circumstances and backstories turn them off to the heart of Christ and the love that God has for them, even though their life didn't reflect it.
Wow, that's so cool. And it just involved taking that step toward him and engaging with him, and God broke your
Absolutely.
heart. Wow. And
Oh, yeah.
so it's not stopped yet. I know you're still serving with them in various capacities over the years. So what's it look like for you to actually serve the teenagers who are in jail? You mentioned, that you've been in a chaplain role before. So what's it actually look like to step into their world and to serve them?
Right now, I'm with the Hamilton County Juvenile Court Youth Center. That's the technical name for the space. And this facility is different because the one that I was in Alabama was a statewide facility. And so a lot of these young people were coming from all over Alabama and going back to their specific homes. Whereas this facility is all young people from Hamilton County or neighboring areas, right? So sometimes they get in trouble in Hamilton County, but don't live in Hamilton County and do time in Hamilton County. But for the most part, the vast majority of these youth live in my community, right?
Okay.
And so for me, there's a bit of a bridge. I know we're talking about incarcerated youth, but since I spend so much time in some of the public schools, there are times where I walk into the space and there's a kid that I saw at a local high school, right? Or moments where I'm leaving the facility and I go to a local high school and the kid's like, hey, you remember me? And I'm like, I'm not allowed to say if I remember.
Yeah.
Please be quiet, right? Just no one's supposed to know you were down there, kind
Yeah.
of situation. So that is a pretty unique space for me, and working with the young people there is a lot of, and rightfully so, a lot of confidentiality,
Mm,
things that are not the same for adults, right? And so just protecting their youth is very important. And I think that's
mm.
probably the biggest piece of walking into that space with them is just remembering that these are children.
Yeah.
We forget that when kids make mistakes, we automatically turn them into adults.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is they're kids and they made some really bad mistakes. And so it's our job to remember that they're children, treat them as such, and love them as such
Mm.
they've gone through. And so for me, a big part of that text is just showing up, be consistent. I do weekly groups down there. Not all of them are religiously based.
Okay.
So I have one group a month that I do that's a religiously based group, and then I also have a weekly group that is just social emotional learning. We kind of talk, I call it real talk. We're just having conversations about life. And then there's also just moments where I show up for requests. So they request to just talk or to
Mm.
pray, let them know that as clergy, they are protected in conversations with me. So a judge can't subpoena me and have me come speak about whatever we've talked about. But I am also a mandated reporter. So if there are conversations of harm in any way, that I have to disclose, but kind of letting them know, like, hey, we can talk about anything. We can talk about your case, and you could tell me you did it. I can't testify against you, right?
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is this is protected conversations, which is also very helpful. And so a lot of it is showing up in those ways. And then there are also moments of maybe a family request, a chaplain visit, or the leadership of the facility initiates a chaplain request due to bereavement or situations that happen while young people are incarcerated, where a sibling may pass while incarcerated, or another family member, grandparent, parent. There are moments where people get sick while they're incarcerated. Sorry, family members of the incarcerated young person get sick. And so, having to show up and let them know that their
Mm.
family member had a cancer diagnosis, right? And just being present in that moment and saying, hey, if you want to pray, I'm here.
Mm.
If you want to request at any time, I'm here. I have 24-hour access to the facility. Whenever you need me to come see you, I'll show up.
Mm.
And so that's another big part of it too, is just kind of being present in those small moments.
Wow, that's so cool. To be there for teenagers who are going through some of probably their darkest times is got to be such a privilege, but at the same time, I'm sure it's incredibly difficult at times. So, if you could, like, what are some of those more difficult times that you've had to go through in that ministry to kind of give us a little perspective on what that is?
Yeah, I would say the most difficult thing is to see hopelessness. There are young people who made mistakes, and the cards that life dealt them, they actually did a really good job. Like, if we're just being honest, right? We just
Hmm.
all things what they are. They did the best they could with what they had, and it wasn't
Hmm.
much. And so now they're facing the reality of a court date coming up. And I think the hardest part is praying with them, preparing for a court date. And they get back from the court date and you can see on their face that like everything's changed.
Hmm.
Mm. Because for them now, I'm not getting out anytime soon.
Hmm.
I'm 16 years old and I'm going to be incarcerated until I'm 40.
Wow.
Right. And so for them, they just kind of lose all hope. And for them, their life is now over because most teenagers can't see into the future until they're 40, right? If you ask a
Hmm.
teenager in a regular circumstance, loving family, like they're not going to do a good job of telling you, when I'm 40, this is what I
Yeah.
imagine for my life, right? I'm 32 and I can barely do that with accuracy, right? And so I think for me, it's like seeing that is definitely the hardest thing
Hmm.
when you know their stories, you know their background, you know what they're going through, but then you also know what they did. And then you have to find a way to navigate accepting of one's consequences and holding on to hope at the
Hmm.
same time,
Hmm.
right? Being able to read and breathe life back into them when they were just told that they're going to serve life in prison, at 16 or 17 years old. And so that is definitely the hardest thing is to see that happen, but it's also what kind of keeps me coming back.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know, yeah. I mean, every story is different, and so I know we probably shouldn't compare stories, but I know, on a regular basis, those of us that work with teenagers, they go through hard times all the time. I mean, whether it's a bad grade on a test or a breakup or whatever, we're always counseling through difficult times. But if I may step into that that comparison game a little bit, man, that's a whole other level of like
Absolutely.
it's one thing to get a bad grade on a test, but to like, yeah, now be looking at life in prison. That's tough.
Yeah,
Wow.
it is. It is. And I'll be honest. So there's a piece of it. You can tell me this is all based or not, but like with what we do at NYM,
Mhm.
networking youth leaders, there are people that I see at the juvenile detention center all the time who work with youth in this context, who work with youth who are under the state's custody, right? Like, and when I say it makes it really difficult for them to network with men and women who are in a more suburban context, and this is not to anyone's fault,
Yeah.
right? But like it kind of creates a barrier in a lot of ways for a lot of people of like, I don't know if I want to talk to you when you're talking about, your kids sending inappropriate pictures on their phone and trying to find ways to talk through, purity with them. But then
Hmm.
like I'm here in the hospital with my kid who was just shot last night. Like
Right. Right.
that's a different ministry context. And I think one of the things that keeps me in NYM is hoping to bridge that gap because I do
Yeah.
think we're all on the same battlefield, right?
Hmm.
And the comparison game can be very, I think, uncomfortable. And I just think is an opportunity for unity to be like really focused on
Hmm.
and to be able
Hmm.
to open for the conversations across the board for everyone to still be together, even our ministry context is just very different.
Yeah.
But it also means that we just need to do a better job of loving each other well. So if you know a brother or sister who's working in that kind of context who works with youth who come from that background, like just do your best to be present and love on them a little bit because they're facing a little bit more than what some of us maybe can imagine.
Yeah, that's so important, and really one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here and talk about this because we need to shed more light on this because there's so many teenagers that are caught in the system and they're facing all these different things and we need people that are stepping into that place to love and support those teenagers, but at the same time, yeah, we need to know that there's there's brothers and sisters of ours that are stepping into that, and I may not completely understand it, but they are able to do that, and I need to be able to love them and pray for them and support them through it. Man,
Absolutely.
so knowing that it's an incredibly difficult place to be, what are some of those stories that you've seen of redemption, of teenagers that have maybe completely been able to change their life around, or what that you've been able to see? And maybe those are the things that you even keep in your mind when it gets really tough. You're like, oh, I've had some really good stories too.
Yeah. So I have two that I think come to mind. One is actually a young gentleman who I had the unfortunate reality of seeing incarcerated and in school.
Mm,
And so, like I said before, like there's this reality of like, hey, do not tell them where you know me from.
yeah.
Right. Like I can't, we can't disclose that. Like, yes, I'm a chaplain down here. Everyone who spent time down here knows who I am. And so when I go to your high school, I don't need you guys running up to me saying, you remember me when I was down there? Like, please don't do that. Right.
Yeah.
So this young person did not listen to that. They were very adamant about letting everyone know where they knew me from and, kind of how he felt about my presence there at the school. And he was like, man, you got to come sign up for this program that he's doing. And it was really, really good to see that the small seeds that you plant, that
Mm,
the word of God is true, and that I planted the seed and then someone else somehow watered it,
mm,
right? But then God blessed me, excuse me, to be able to see increase on the back end, and I always say that in ministry, in this context, you're planting seeds to trees you'll never feel the shade of, because there's a reality of like, this has to grow to
mm,
maturity on its own. And by the time it does, I'm probably not going to be alive,
mm.
but that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the real work of ministry. But the Lord was able to kind of give me a reaffirming sneak peek at redemption for this young person who was incarcerated, but now I'm seeing them in school, and I'm doing this after school program. No, it's actually during school program, and they're like, man, I'm gonna get some of my brothers to come and hang out with us while we're doing this group. And he just became a leader. He was like, I know him, he's good people, he does a good job. He really became just a real champion for the program we were doing at that school, and kind of became a leader just amongst those young men. It's like, hey, like we should be doing this. And remember that time we were inside, you were talking about this and this. Man, I didn't believe you, but I went and tried it and it worked. And so just seeing that happen, I was just like, man, this is crazy. I'm trying not to cry when we're in the group. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't even have to teach because you're just doing all the stuff that was talked about before. And so
Yeah.
that was an amazing moment. And so I think that's been very affirming for me. Another one is a young person who actually ended up coming down. It was a bereavement visit for their grandmother who passed,
Mm,
and I wound up going there. And the backstory was crazy because it was this group of kids who were all siblings, and they were in JFS custody since they were like babies.
mm.
And so they didn't really have a relationship with their mother. They knew who their mother was. They interacted with their mother on a regular basis, but she never had custody of all of her kids, to the point where these two young men actually ended up meeting while incarcerated, and they hadn't seen each other in years.
Wow.
And so here they are, brothers in the same facility, like, man, I haven't seen you in forever. And so the staff actually went out their way to just kind of facilitate opportunities for the two of them to just be brothers, right?
Mm,
Just moments where they can go in and just hang out with each other because they're on two different units, right? And so it was really cool. But there was a bereavement that took place, and their sister ended up coming to the facility
mm.
to have a conversation, and she just needed a job. She was looking for something and was fresh out of high school and trying to figure out things, and she's having conversations of like, I'm gonna get an apartment so you guys can come stay with me. And she's like all about her family, all about her brothers. And I was like, well, what kind of job are you looking for? We
Yeah.
ended up walking out together, and so we kind of made some phone calls, got her connected with some people, ended up getting her the kind of job she wanted. And so being able to follow up with them on a regular basis to kind of see like, how are you doing? What do you need? Just this family with very unfortunate circumstances that were totally outside of their control,
Mm,
but yet somehow this hopefulness was still alive in them.
Yeah.
be a family together again as siblings who were growing up apart and always had a desire to be reunited. And here she is at a very young age with these horrible life circumstances, but like just trying the best that she can with what she has to be intentional about building a life for her and her siblings. That for me definitely keeps me going on a regular basis to
Mm.
see like, man, she can work past all of that.
Yeah.
I can absolutely make my way up here to this facility and have a quick conversation with a kid.
Yeah, that's so cool. And to be able to see, I'm sure this doesn't happen with every one of them, like you said, but to be able to see, the progress over time and be able to check in on them is really cool too. Wow. So Orlando, you and I both know that we're in this to serve teenagers, but a lot of times we end up learning a lot from them, maybe sometimes more than we teach them. So, what are
Yeah.
some things that you've learned from working with this population of teenagers?
But what have I learned? I've learned that trauma is a real thing and it has an actual effect on a young person's growth.
Mm,
Like it does. And not just their worldview, but their view of themselves, their lens for just reality, right? It's like trying to look through binoculars that have cracked lenses,
mm,
right? That's what I kind of use as an analogy for how trauma works. It's like it's
mm,
not that they don't see things correctly. It's just that what they're seeing through is incorrect,
mm,
right? And so how do we then recognize that the problem isn't the kid? The problem isn't the world they live in. The problem
mm,
is the lens that they're looking through.
mm,
And so I've had to learn from there the approach of fixing a lens is dramatically different from an approach of trying to fix a kid,
mm.
right?
That's
Like it's
yeah,
not my job to fix the kid, you
yeah.
know, it's my job to fix the lens.
Mm,
And so how do we go through that? Because I can't undo what they went through.
sure.
Can undo that. That's something we have to lay at the foot of the cross. That's it. That's God's job. That's not
Mm,
my job. Right.
yeah.
And so pointing them to Christ is all I could ever hope to do.
Mm,
And trusting God, I think has been a real thing for me, like really trusting him with these young people.
yeah.
I think that's probably the thing that helps me sleep at night is like, God, I'm putting them in your hands.
Yeah.
Cause it's easier for me to get caught up in myself and be like, I have to do more, I have to show up, all the things that you want
Yeah.
to do, the sense
Yeah.
of urgency that can get really toxic, right? But like
Mhm.
really taking the time to just know what I'm here to do. I'm not here to fix the kids. I'm not here to fix their situation. I'm here to just focus on the lens.
Mm,
That's my role. That's my job. Let's try our best to fix that lens. And then as the lens gets fixed, how do I point their gaze towards Christ?
mm,
Right. Because if I
yeah.
point you towards Christ with a broken lens, now your relationship with him is going to be broken.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
if I can help fix the lens and then point you to Christ, now you can have your own relationship with him and you can develop something with him and you can learn to put all those things you experience in life that are real, that were
Mhm.
unfair, that were not your fault. You could place those at the feet of Christ, right?
Mm,
Because we oftentimes forget that sin is not something that we necessarily do. A lot of sin happens to us first.
mm,
Like, and we really forget that sometimes.
yeah.
Like, especially for kids. Like, we're not talking about a bunch of people who are like out here 32 years old robbing banks. Like,
Yeah.
we love to look at kids in that way, but we don't really take the time to recognize that some of the most really terrible things about sin nature is that these kids are victims of sin long before they're perpetrators of sin.
Mm,
And so how do I fix that lens first? So then
yeah.
you can be open to turning your gaze towards Christ.
Mm, that's so good. I think we should be able to we need to take that
Yeah.
perspective with any teenager. Like,
Absolutely.
man,
Absolutely.
that's so important. And I just did an episode even just last week and just talked about how to work with teenagers who are disrupting youth group.
Mhm.
And like even doing that and like step into their world, understand where they're coming from. Man,
Absolutely.
there could be a lot of things that are completely out of their hands and that is leading to them and their actions within youth group. And so instead of just like, lashing out at them, step into their world a little bit, get to know where they're coming from and what's been leading them to these actions in their life. That's so
Absolutely. And
good.
not to get too preachy, but I do think it's imperative for God's ever advancing kingdom
Mm.
for us to remember that reality.
Yeah.
Like, God does not call us to come into the world and provide correction from the standpoint of like, this is what everybody's doing incorrectly, or
Mm.
this is what we should like. It's really understanding that this happened to us first,
Mhm.
right? To be born in sin, shaped in iniquity, means that you were first a victim of sin
Yeah.
before you perpetrate it.
Mm.
But we constantly are in this space of trying to approach sin as a thing that we have to rid people of when
Mm.
that was done on the cross, right?
Yeah.
But why would God do that on the cross and not simply through repentance? Because
Mhm.
the cross happened without us repenting, right?
Yeah.
So it's like understanding that, like, hey, we are first victims of this before we become perpetrators of it, which is why
Yeah.
the cross and coming to a space of repentance is important.
Mhm.
But it's like I have to accept what Christ did on the cross first
Yeah.
and be willing to repent. And so I think as I approach my ministry, I always view it as that. I know the word victim. Please take the context off of that. If you're like victim mentality is a thing, that's a you problem. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the definition of what it means to be subjected to a thing first,
Yeah.
right? We're subjected to it first before we're out here doing terrible things, right? And so we have to be careful in how we approach people. And I think adults, children, and the like, and just always having that grace that says, man, there's obviously something a little bit deeper than that. I
Mhm.
always call sin spiritual trauma,
Mm.
right? Like it's trauma on a spiritual level. That's what sin
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And so we have to understand that there's a root to that. And the root to that is usually some event that took place that changed the dynamic of what's happening inside of you. And of course, we read the Bible, we know what that event was, right? And
Yep.
so if we approach it as a trauma that's spiritual, I
Mm.
think it'll change how we approach sin and the sinner for that matter,
Mhm.
right? Like it'll help us in our ministries a lot more if we just kind of maybe took the time to be gracious in our approach.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think your example of a young person that's being disruptive to youth group is a perfect example of that.
Orlando, I could go off on just that for like a whole other hour probably in this episode, but that's
Sorry, I'm
so
sorry, I'll be
good.
quiet.
So no, it's so good. Maybe we'll come back and visit it at another episode at some point. But at this point, like I'm sure people are listening and they've gotten to this point where their heart's starting to break a little bit for these teenagers, and they're like, okay, what do I do about this? Like maybe there's teenagers in my own community, maybe there is a facility in my area. I'm going to take a couple different approaches. But first of all, what if youth leaders want to get involved in helping in a similar ministry as you in their area? Where do they start?
Yeah, so you can start in a couple of places. One, I would say context is key. So I live in a border city, so we're on the border of Ohio and Kentucky. You get to Kentucky, they run it totally different from Ohio
Mm.
does it, right? So context is key. I would just say take some time to learn where do young people go when they're in trouble in your space, right? And usually that's on a county level. And so also take a look at what facilities are near you. There, more often than not, are plenty of ways for people to volunteer or be present at these facilities. For instance, in Hamilton County, Ohio, there's a whole department that runs volunteer work. And so you can come in and teach kids chess. You can come in and do a Bible study. There are plenty of churches that send people to do that. If your church has a prison ministry, that's a great place to start because a lot of those kind of come with some credibility. So if your church has a prison ministry, but it doesn't go to a juvenile detention center, that would be a great place to start.
Mm.
Start with your church's prison ministry, talk to them there, see what they did to get involved in their local jail, and see what you can do to do the same for incarcerated youth in your
Yeah.
area. I think that's a great place if you're plugged into a church, if you're plugged into a community and not just your faith community. I would say just take some time to do some research on, what organizations in the area are already doing work with incarcerated youth. Because I will say some of the barriers can be a little bit more cumbersome because we're talking about teenagers, right?
Sure.
And so just being intentional about, kind of seeking some clear certifications. They have some certification things for chaplains in juvenile detention centers, right? So if you're a youth pastor and you want to get involved in that way, becoming a chaplain at your local center would be, I think, a great idea if they have volunteer chaplains. Another thing would just be reaching out to whatever judge or magistrate in your area does juvenile offenses or work, right? It's a great place to do it. I know reaching out to a judge may sound weird, but I promise you, those government officials are a lot more open to conversations and people approaching them in this way than you may think. So just do some research and reach out to those groups of people, and I think you should be pretty successful in starting something up.
Cool, cool. And I love, like, one of the things someone taught me a long time ago, and I'm so grateful for it. But when I moved to a new community, for instance, this community, when I first moved here to be a youth pastor, and went almost, I think, within my first month or so to go and meet with some police officers who would
Mhm.
connected with teenagers on a regular basis. And I was like, tell me about teenagers in this community. Tell me about the ones that are
Yeah.
struggling. Help me learn more through you and your experience.
Mhm.
And recently there's a youth center in town that focuses on being a little more proactive with teenagers who may tend to be, going into jail if someone doesn't step in early. And that's something we're actually going to be, if any of the youth pastors that are in our local network hear this, I'm telling them next time we're actually going to go and have our network meeting at their facility to learn
That's
more
great.
about it, maybe start to volunteer on a regular basis, because it's just another way to get involved in those ways. And it's incredibly simple. We just show up.
Yeah. I would say another that just reminded me of another way to kinda get involved is all of these facilities are required to do some level of educational work with them, not some level. They're required to be in school, to say that. And 9 times out of 10, the local school district provides the educational services and schooling for that facility.
Mm,
So in Hamilton County, because it's in Cincinnati proper, Cincinnati Public Schools has teachers and a principal that are part of Cincinnati Public Schools that do all of the schoolwork for the Hamilton County Youth Center,
mm,
right? So that may be another great space for you to get those resources and contact because there's a lot of overlap between a lot more overlap than we may think between juvenile courts, if your county has one, and the local school districts. So that if you have school district connections, that's a great way to get into contact with someone who's working in juvenile detention as well.
that's so cool. So yeah, lots of things to keep in mind. But let's just move to the students themselves, the teenagers themselves. How would you
Yeah.
advise youth leaders to show up for the teenagers that find themselves in this kind of a context?
I would say show up with the utmost humility.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is kind of a two-prong approach. One is being truly authentic, right?
mm,
Like genuinely showing up as yourself. Don't hold anything back.
mm,
Please know that when you talk to this group of people, the life that they have lived, nothing is off limits.
mm,
These young people have questioned my marriage, have my fidelity to my marriage. They have questioned if I'm a good father. They have questioned if monogamy is a real thing in today's society. Like these kids do not care,
mm,
and rightfully so, because I'm walking into their life as the most provocative person they've ever met. What do I mean by that? In their mind, for me to be a black man married to a black woman who is the mother of both of my kids, and I have a house and I pay my mortgage, and I'm like everything that I do, the life that I live, to them is provocative.
mm.
They've never seen it before. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist. It's
Mm,
not a part of their reality. And so I'm now telling them that, hey, this is possible for you.
yeah.
And they're like, this was never supposed to be possible for me.
Mm,
So I have to be humble in my approach and understanding that I am literally challenging their worldview and existing in this space.
sure. Wow.
Another space of that humility is being curious. Like curiosity goes a long way, like a very long way. And the reason why curiosity is important is because we have to understand, and this is probably great for working with youth in general. You will be able to teach half as much as you learn. Like if you're not coming into the space learning 2 or 3 things from them before
Mm.
you begin to give them some nugget of truth that you think you have, then, like, you're not gonna be effective, I promise you, right? And so that level of curiosity and humility is so key because you're coming as a student and not as a practitioner.
Yeah.
And when we can show up as a student, that goes a long way. And I think that's also biblical, right? Like the greatest
Yeah.
among us is servant. And so if I can come in looking for ways to serve you,
Yeah.
now I'm actually being given, don't get too preacher Orlando. I'm now putting myself in the seat of authority, right? Like that's when the disciples are like, we want to be at your right and your left. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, the greatest among you will be a servant. And so how
Mhm.
do I come serve them? That's what establishes authority to teach.
Mm.
Is serving them, right? Like I talked about the beautiful portion of me starting in ministry was just finding ways to serve first before I could ever teach.
Yep.
That level of credibility, I mean, there are things that you can say and do that you wouldn't be able to say and do because they know that you love them enough to
Mhm.
come and serve before you can come and preach.
Yeah.
And so you go into a space full of young people trying to preach and save the day, they're going to chew you up and spit you out. Go into a space of young people, especially incarcerated, who come from traumatic backgrounds, and you just show up and say, I'm here to love you and be present and learn from you. Now they're going to start asking you questions, and you have an opportunity to witness and to teach.
Mm.
And so you can approach humility with those two things. Know that you are provocative to them in your very existence, and know that you have to show up as a student first and be curious about their life and who they are, that gives you the equity to teach them. I think that would be really the way to do ministry in that context.
Mm. That's so good. That's so good. And like you said, it's universal. Like this is students that are
Yeah,
in, this situation, but any teenager wants that from the
mhm,
adults that are stepping into their lives. Wow.
absolutely.
Orlando, you've shared so much wisdom already. I'm so grateful that you've been here, but I want to give you a last chance as we wrap up here. What encouragement maybe has God put in your heart from your experience and all that you've done within youth ministry? What experience or what encouragement would you like to share those who are listening today?
Um, that God is at work in every context. There isn't a single corner of the world, there isn't a single space of darkness that he is not very aware of. And so you just showing up and being a part of the light that God chooses to put in that dark corner is enough. Your presence makes so much of a difference, especially in the life of a young person. And so if you can just be present for one, what more could anyone ask? And so my encouragement to you would be if you're in a room with 30, 4, 5, 1,500, just focus on one
Mm,
if you can. If you can be present for just one, that is enough. And God can use that.
mm,
And so my encouragement to anyone who may be listening is like, man, I promise you're enough.
mm,
Your presence, as I said before, is the most provocative thing they will ever get to see. You being salt and light, you are the Bible scripture they're going to read for the first time.
mm.
You're the first prayer that they're ever going to pray, right? That is the first spiritual experience most of these young people will have in their life happens when you show up.
Mm.
And so I would encourage you to show up.
That's such a great reminder. Orlando, I absolutely love talking to you every chance I get, and I'm sure that people were blessed by hearing from you today. If they want to connect with you more and follow up with any other questions or anything like that, what's the best way people can find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram primarily, and that Instagram handle is Lando Hale, Landohale. That's on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, Orlando Hale Senior. And then my email is going to be ohale, OHALE at nnym.org. That's no, no, yes, maybe. For those of you who are like, what is that? nnym.org. Please reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to talk with you, to wrestle some thoughts with you or whatever we want to do.
Cool. Orlando, I'm so grateful for you and your ministry, and I love learning from you and gaining perspective every time we talk. I feel like I gain a ton in perspective. And so I hope that people who are listening today also gain that and some maybe learn some more about the other teenagers that I think a lot of times we forget about in our communities. And we need to have our eyes open and our ears open to them as well. And so thank you for all you do for that population of teenagers and how you lead out in an amazing way. And you're doing so many great things for God's kingdom. And I just pray that God would bless it all.
Brother, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. You don't know how much of a light you have been for me. And I don't say that just to say that. It's been really refreshing because I talk about like curiosity, right? Like your questions, your space where you show up as a learner is so refreshing for me. And I really appreciate your heart and how you go through ministry and even just your platform that you have here and just wanting to be a resource for people, man. It is not lost on me. It is not lost on a lot of people. And I really appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If it's helped you connect and grow, would you please do two things? First, leave a positive review on your favorite podcast app. And second, share this with other youth leaders. Not only do these two simple things help us reach more leaders, but it also helps me continue to get great guests like Orlando. And if you'd like to go beyond that and support my ministry with National Network of Youth Ministries, which in part makes this podcast happen, head over to nnym.org/Steve Cullum, or you can follow the links in the show notes to join my prayer partnership team and my financial partnership team. And to those who have already joined, know that I appreciate your partnership so much. And if you're looking for a guest speaker for your next youth group event, camp, training, or more, check out the Speaker Hub at youthmenhub.com/speakerhub, where you'll find me and many other great student ministry focused speakers. That link is also going to be in our show notes. And as I mentioned on previous episodes, I'll be at several events this fall, so please pray for me. But also, if you're at the Youth Pastor Summit, the PACT Roundtable, or the DYM 100 Roundtable, please be sure to say hello. I would love to meet you in person. We'll be back in a couple weeks with our next episode, but for now, be sure to stay connected and may God bless your ministry.